Welcome to the Deep Dive. We take a stack of sources and unpack the most important information for you. Think of it as your shortcut to being well-informed, cutting through the noise to get straight to the interesting facts and surprising insights. Today, we are doing a deep dive into a genuinely fascinating source, a 2024 master's thesis from Istanbul University, specifically from their Pharmacognosy department. The focus: phytotherapy, the use of plants for weight loss.
That's right. And this thesis is, well, it's a massive compilation of existing literature. We're talking in vitro lab studies, in vivo animal research, human clinical trials, and even case reports looking at 18 specific plants studied for their potential roles in treating obesity.
It really digs into their proposed effects, how they might work, the side effects people have experienced.
Potential drug interactions, yeah, and who absolutely shouldn't use them, the contraindications.
Plus, it includes this interesting real-world layer. A look at supplement data from Arx Media Pharma to see which of these plants are actually showing up in commercial preparations and, in what forms. So our mission today, diving into this extensive review, is basically to distill all of that for you. We'll highlight the most important nuggets, what the proposed benefits are, the science explored in the source, and critically, the safety considerations for each plant that's discussed in detail.
Okay, let's start by setting the stage a bit. The source defines obesity quite simply as an imbalance, taking in more calories than you expend. Straightforward enough.
Right, but it immediately highlights the huge range of serious health issues linked to it. I mean, we're talking everything from metabolic problems like diabetes to cardiovascular disease, musculoskeletal issues, gastrointestinal stuff, kidney problems.
Psychological conditions, even certain cancers. It's really complex, stemming from the expansion and dysfunction of fat tissue itself.
So the source runs through the standard approaches first, right?
The standard treatments. The foundational role of diet, aiming for a calorie deficit, regular physical activity, pharmacological treatments for certain individuals based on BMI and comorbidities.
And surgical options like bariatric surgery or intragastric balloons.
And then it brings in phytotherapy using plants or plant compounds as another area being explored. The source notes these herbs could potentially help in various ways, maybe by suppressing appetite, stimulating metabolism, lowering lipids.
Increasing that feeling of fullness, satiety.
Exactly. Boosting energy expenditure, or directly reducing fat tissue mass. And some might even work through multiple mechanisms, it seems.
Okay, so with that context, let's start unpacking some of these individual plants highlighted in the source. This is where things get really interesting, I think.
Absolutely. Where should we start? How about Amorphophallus konjac? Most people probably know it just as konjac.
Right, the tuber. The source points to its key component, that soluble fiber, glucomannan.
Yeah. And the primary mechanism described in the thesis is, well, it's fascinatingly simple. It delays gastric emptying.
So it just sits in your stomach longer.
Basically, yeah. It hangs out longer, helping you feel full. The source adds it might also form a sort of protective coating in the gut and potentially help lower glucose, cholesterol, and triglycerides too. So maybe some metabolic support as well.
Okay. Did the studies mentioned in the review back this up?
Well, the source reviewed animal studies showing decreased weight gain, yes. And some clinical trials in type 2 diabetics where glucomannan supplementation led to improved glucose and lipid responses. So some evidence there for the proposed effects.
What about safety? Were there any, red flags mentioned?
Crucially, yes. This is important. The source included a case report of esophageal impaction, essentially, a blockage in a young child who ingested the powder form.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it really underscores the importance of proper use and making sure you take it with enough liquid. The form matters.
That's a powerful reminder right away. So potentially helpful for satiety, but dose form and usage are critical safety points. Did the source say if it's found in supplements much?
It did. According to the source's scan of the Arx Media Pharma database, it's found in 5 mono preparations. So it's out there.
Okay, moving on. How about pineapple? Ananas commosis. Seems like a more familiar one, maybe.
Indeed. The source focuses on the fruit, specifically the enzyme bromelain. It's a proteolytic enzyme, meaning it breaks down proteins.
So the mechanism is mainly about digestion, helping break down food.
That's one angle mentioned, aiding protein digestion. The source also suggests it might help reduce edema, swelling, which could indirectly support weight loss efforts, perhaps.
Interesting. Any study findings reviewed for weight loss?
Well, animal studies showed reductions in weight, abdominal circumference, and fat mass. And the thesis also mentioned a safety study in children using oral bromelain for sinusitis. Only one child with a known allergy had a mild allergic reaction. But here's a key point from the source. Despite pineapple's popular association with weight loss, no clinical studies focused solely on its weight loss effects were detailed in this comprehensive review.
Huh. That's really interesting. So potential mechanisms, some animal data, but the clinical picture specifically for weight loss wasn't strongly represented in this thesis.
Exactly. Yet the database scan found it's one of the most frequent plants and supplements, 15 preparations, 7 mono, 8 combined. But as the source cautions, though, those combined uses might be for other things entirely, like joint support due to bromelain's anti-inflammatory effects. You really need to look at the specific product.
Good point. Always read the label carefully. What's next on the list?
Camellia sinensis green tea, a classic, right. We're talking the leaves containing caffeine and those phenolic compounds like catechins, EGCG.
Okay, so caffeine for metabolism, that makes sense. What about the catechins? What do they do?
The source highlights them boosting thermogenesis, basically your body burning calories to produce heat. Combined with caffeine's metabolic boost, they're thought to increase energy expenditure and fat oxidation. The thesis also mentions green tea might help prevent the development of fat tissue itself.
Okay. What did the research review show? Was it positive?
The source reviewed animal studies showing anti-obesity effects, yeah. Clinical trials indicated increased energy expenditure and fat oxidation, and some support for maintaining weight after loss, which is often the hard part. Supplementation also showed improvements in lipid and glucose markers in obese patients in some trials reviewed.
Sounds pretty promising on the efficacy side then. And it's popular in the real world too.
Very. The source found it in 14 preparations in the database, split pretty evenly between mono and combined.
All right, how about capsicum annuum? That's pepper, right? Hot peppers.
That's the one, specifically focusing on compounds like capsaicin, the stuff that gives peppers their heat.
So the mechanism is linked to that heat, making you burn more.
Precisely. The source says capsaicin boosts thermogenesis by stimulating certain receptors, and it increases lipid circulation. The idea is this leads to reduced fat mass and increased energy expenditure in studies.
Okay. Did the human trials match the animal data reviewed?
Well, in vitro and animal studies did support these mechanisms, showing less fat tissue and better metabolic markers. But a clinical trial using a capsaicin extract did show increased fat oxidation, but no significant weight loss difference from placebo over 3 months. And the source speculated this might be because the extract was just too spicy and patients couldn't really stick to the dose, compliance issues.
Right.
Interestingly, though, another trial with a combined supplement that included capsaicin did show greater fat mass loss.
That really illustrates the challenge, doesn't it? You can have a promising mechanism in the lab, but translating it into a practical, effective dose that people can actually tolerate. That's a whole other hurdle. Side effects, even just being too spicy, can totally impact the real-world results.
Absolutely. It's a key point the source implicitly raises. It's not just about if it works, but can people use it?
Okay, what's next? Papaya. Carica papaya.
Yes. The source points to enzymes like papain in the fruit. It's, well known as a digestive aid, but the thesis also explored its potential anti-obesity effects.
How might it work for weight loss specifically, according to the source? What did the studies show?
Studies mentioned include lab work showing papaya juice inhibits enzymes involved in fat digestion, like lipase. And animal studies showed reductions in obesity markers, liver fat, and improved cholesterol triglyceride levels in animals fed high-fat diets.
Okay, so potential mechanisms and some animal data.
Yeah.
Now, safety, anything notable there?
This is where the source raises some significant warnings. Side effects reported include rash, especially from the leaf apparently, and gastrointestinal issues like nausea and vomiting with tablets.
Okay.
And the source lists interactions with several common medications, things like oral hypoglycemics, certain antibiotics, some cardiovascular drugs. And alarmingly, the source includes case reports of liver enzyme disorders and rash linked to its use.
Wow, liver issues. That's definitely serious.
Yeah.
The source mentioned this plant had a unique profile in its review, didn't it?
It did. According to the thesis, this was the only plant among the 18 studied in detail that had no listed clinical trials specifically for weight loss, but did have case reports detailing adverse effects or interactions.
That's a really important point for you, the listener, to consider. No clinical weight loss trials in this specific review, but documented safety issues.
Exactly. Definitely something to highlight.
Okay. What about senna, Cassia angustifolia?
Senna, using the dried leaves and fruits, contains anthraquinone glycosides.
The mechanism is, well, it's pretty well known, isn't it? Laxative.
It is. The source describes its primary mechanism simply as a laxative effect.
And the safety profile, what did the review say?
The source is very clear and, frankly, quite strong on this. It strongly advises against long-term use. It states it should only be used for a few days, max. Prolonged use carries significant risks detailed in the reviewed literature, including severe electrolyte imbalances, dehydration, and potential liver issues.
Okay, so definitely not a weight loss strategy.
Not a safe or sustainable one, no. Contraindications are strict. Intestinal obstruction, undiagnosed abdominal pain, severe dehydration. It's not recommended for children under 12 or during pregnancy lactation. And it interacts with various heart medications, diuretics, corticosteroids, even licorice, mainly due to that risk of dangerous electrolyte imbalances.
So essentially for weight loss, it works by causing water loss and potentially messing up your electrolytes, and it's definitely not a safe long-term solution. Big risks.
Exactly. A key distinction the source makes. It's a treatment for constipation, not weight loss.
Right. Next up, Ceylon cinnamon, Cinnamomum zeylanicum. What did the source say about that?
This refers to the bark, containing compounds like cinnamaldehyde and eugenol. Its proposed mechanism in the thesis revolves around improving glucose metabolism.
How so? Like for blood sugar?
Yeah, reducing glucose absorption after meals, stimulating cells to take up glucose, possibly enhancing insulin activity. The idea is that better blood sugar control might indirectly support weight management.
Any clinical data reviewed specifically for weight loss?
Well, the source didn't detail extensive specific clinical weight loss trials for cinnamon itself. However, it did cite a meta-analysis that showed significant reductions in BMI, weight, and waist circumference across several studies combined. And a phase I safety study also noted a decrease in LDL cholesterol with no significant adverse effects reported, suggesting a potentially favorable safety profile, at least in that context.
Interesting. So the clinical evidence mentioned is more about metabolic markers and body measurements from pooling studies rather than dedicated weight loss trials for this specific plant. But the safety study sounded okay.
Right. The source pulls from various types of studies. Now let's talk about one with a really concerning safety profile, according to this thesis. Citrus aurantium, bitter orange.
Oh, yes. I feel like I've heard this one linked to issues before. What does the source say is the active component?
It's the fruit peel containing piscinophrin. And the source explicitly notes its chemical similarity to ephedrine.
Okay, red flag number one. And the proposed mechanism, same as ephedrine.
Pretty much. Stimulating metabolism and thermogenesis. Animal studies reviewed showed it could reduce visceral fat, sometimes more effectively when combined with other herbs.
So it sounds like it could work, mechanism-wise.
The source presents evidence suggesting mechanisms for weight loss are plausible based on some studies. BUT, and this is a massive but highlighted clearly in the thesis. The safety profile is incredibly complex and, frankly, concerning.
How so?
While the source does acknowledge some clinical trials found no significant increase in heart rate or blood pressure at certain doses, it explicitly states that severe cardiovascular side effects, including heart attack, stroke, seizures, and sudden death, have been reported in the literature it reviewed.
That's incredibly serious, sudden death.
It is. The source directly connects this back to ephedra, noting that chemical similarity and reminding us that ephedra was banned by the FDA in 2004 for these same kinds of risks. Bitter orange was also banned by the NCAA. The case reports cited in the thesis are alarming. Myocardial infarction, angina, ventricular fibrillation, ischemic colitis, all linked to supplements containing piscinophrin, sometimes combined with caffeine.
Wow. And drug interactions mentioned.
Yes, potential interactions, especially with medications metabolized by a key liver enzyme, CYP3A4. The source lists examples like certain immunosuppressants, blood pressure drugs, antivirals, stating caution is advised when used alongside a significant number of medications that use this pathway. It could alter their levels.
So bitter orange is a classic example from this review of something with proposed mechanisms and some study support, maybe. But the documented safety warnings and those case reports are severe red flags you absolutely need to be aware of.
Precisely. A huge caution sign based on this source. And that naturally leads us to Ephedra sinica, or sea grape, which you just mentioned, the source of ephedra.
It is the plant that was banned, right?
Correct. Banned by the FDA in 2004. The source details that it contains ephedrine and related alkaloids.
What were its mechanisms that made it relevant for weight loss before the ban?
They are potent. increasing basal metabolic rate, stimulating thermogenesis significantly, and reducing appetite by boosting norepinephrine release. It hits multiple pathways.
And did the studies confirm these effects? Did it actually work?
Yes. Animal studies reviewed showed significant anti-obesity effects, reduced weight, body fat, improved metabolic markers. Clinical studies confirmed increased metabolism and thermogenesis, and one study showed better weight loss and lipid profiles than placebo, although, importantly, it also increased heart rate.
So it did seem to work, but obviously the risks outweigh the benefits.
Hugely. The source is unequivocal. These are described as powerful pharmacological agents with severe, well-documented risks. Primarily, those cardiovascular problems we mentioned, increased heart rate, heart disease, hypertension, stroke, seizures, sudden death. Risks for thyroid issues, prostate issues, and kidney failure are also listed.
Yeah.
The source stresses the FDA ban was precisely because of these serious side effects. The list of drug interactions is extensive: MAO inhibitors, cardiac meds, certain anesthetics. Case reports included psychiatric illness.
So ephedra is the extreme cautionary tale in this review. Documented efficacy for weight loss, but ultimately deemed far too dangerous due to its severe side effect profile, leading to that regulatory action.
Exactly, a key historical point highlighted in the source. Okay, moving on. Fucus vesiculosis, brown algae, or bladderwrack.
Okay. What did the source highlight about this one? What's in it?
It contains polysaccharides, those complex carbs, and importantly, iodine.
And the proposed weight loss mechanism. Is it the fiber again?
Primarily, the source suggests it's the polysaccharides swelling in the stomach, creating that feeling of fullness, satiety.
Any study evidence reviewed?
Lab studies suggest it might prevent fat accumulation. Animal studies showed less weight gain on a high-fat diet and improved lipid profiles.
Okay. Safety. Any issues, especially with the iodine?
Big safety warnings here, too. The source notes potential heavy metal contamination, things like arsenic, which could lead to kidney failure. That's a serious concern with seaweed sometimes.
Oh, right. Heavy metals.
And yes, the iodine content poses a risk of hyperthyroidism or potentially hypothyroidism with chronic use, depending on the individual. It can also cause acne and allergic reactions. Due to the iodine, it's cautioned for anyone with thyroid problems. It might interact with hypoglycemic drugs and could increase bleeding risk with anticoagulants. Safety in pregnancy and lactation isn't established, and the source says it should be avoided then due to both the thyroid effects and that heavy metal risk.
And did the source find this in supplements?
Interestingly, no. The source reported finding no preparations containing Fucus vesiculosis in their database scan.
Huh. None found. That's notable, especially given those risks.
It is. The source didn't speculate why it wasn't found, but yeah, given the safety profile presented, that absence is interesting. Now, the source also briefly mentions Garcinia cambogia, containing hydroxycitric acid, or HCA. While it wasn't given its own full, detailed section like the others, it's mentioned multiple times in relation to other studies or reviews.
Right. I feel like I've seen this everywhere in weight loss supplements over the years. What did the source's review generally say about it?
Well, some studies referenced in the source indicated positive effects on weight loss and reducing visceral fat, including sometimes when combined with other compounds like glucomannan.
Okay, so some potential there, maybe.
The source does mention some positive findings reported in the literature it reviewed, but it also points explicitly to significant safety concerns. It cites a review highlighting risks and specifically mentions case reports of liver failure, acute hepatitis, and even serotonin toxicity associated with Garcinia use.
Liver failure and serotonin toxicity. Wow, that's incredibly serious for something so widely available. It sounds like another example where popularity doesn't equal proven safety based on this review.
Absolutely. The source makes sure to highlight those severe potential risks reported in the literature. Definitely a caution.
Okay. What about Gymnema sylvestre? Germar. Never heard of that one.
The leaves are used. This one has a rather unique mechanism mentioned in the source, quite different.
Oh, what is it?
It contains compounds, gymnemic acids, that can actually block the taste of sweet on your tongue.
Block the taste of sweet. Seriously, that's wild.
It is pretty unique, yeah. The idea is it reduces the desire for sugary foods, makes them less appealing. Beyond that, it also seems to help by delaying glucose absorption from the gut and can lower blood glucose and improve lipid profiles, which could be particularly helpful for diabetics.
Interesting. What did the studies reviewed show? Did it work?
The animal and human studies reviewed generally support its anti-obesity effects, things like reducing weight gain, body fat, cholesterol, and improving glucose control, especially noted in diabetics. The source did note one animal study showing a weight increase in diabetic rats, which is an outlier finding but worth mentioning for completeness.
Okay. And safety considerations.
Safety notes included potential interactions with drugs metabolized by certain liver enzymes, so always check that. The source also warns that for diabetics, because it lowers blood sugar, it might affect their ability to detect hypoglycemia, low blood sugar episodes. So careful monitoring is crucial, not recommended for use under 18 or during pregnancy lactation based on the reviewed data.
Okay, very unique mechanism. Some positive study findings generally, but definitely requires caution for diabetics and checking potential drug interactions.
Interesting. Next.
Ilex peregriniensis, much more commonly known as yerba mate, the leaves of the part used.
Mate, another one containing caffeine, I assume. Like a tea.
Yes, caffeine is a key component, along with other stimulating compounds like theobromine and various phenolic acids.
So similar mechanism to guarana or green tea then, stimulant effect.
Overlapping, yes. The proposed mechanisms include increasing energy expenditure and fat oxidation, burning more calories. The source also mentions potential appetite suppression and possibly delaying gastric emptying, which could contribute to feeling full. Did the clinical trials reviewed support these ideas?
The source reviewed clinical studies for yerba mate that actually showed some promising results. Reductions in BMI, weight, waist, and hip circumference were noted in some trials, along with reduced body fat mass. Some studies also reported participants feeling less hungry and having better focus or energy during exercise.
Okay, it sounds like it has some documented effects in humans.
Yeah.
What about side effects and safety for this one? Is it just caffeine jitters?
Well, side effects are mostly those typical stimulant-related ones: insomnia, nervousness, palpitations, maybe increased blood pressure, GI upset, BUT. And this is a significant warning highlighted clearly in the source. Long-term high-dose use, particularly of the traditionally prepared hot infusion, has been linked epidemiologically to an increased risk of several types of cancer, specifically mouth, esophagus, larynx, kidney, bladder, and lung.
Wow, cancer risk. And there was a hepatitis case report mentioned too. That's a really serious safety consideration lurking behind the stimulant effects.
Absolutely. The source is very clear on that potential risk, especially with long-term heady consumption. It also notes it shouldn't be used with other stimulants like amphetamines, ephedrine, or cocaine due to additive effects.
Okay, definitely more complex than just a caffeine source. Moving on to flaxseed, Linum usitissimo. This seems like a health food staple, right?
It is. Very common. We're talking about the seeds, known for their fiber, that gel-forming mucilage, and omega-3 fatty acids.
So the mechanism is mostly related to the fiber in that gel.
Primarily satiety, yeah. Due to the fiber swelling up and the mucilage creating bulk, plus a gentle laxative effect, as the source describes.
Any study findings mentioned?
Studies reviewed confirmed it delays gastric emptying and can reduce post-meal hyperglycemia, that blood sugar spike after eating, in diabetics. However, the source did also note some data suggesting the omega-3s in flaxseed might potentially increase fasting glucose levels in diabetics, which is a critical counterpoint for anyone managing diabetes.
Okay, so it can help after meals, but maybe affect fasting sugar. Tricky.
Yeah.
And interactions, I imagine all that fiber can mess with absorption.
Exactly. Significant drug interaction warnings were detailed in the source. The fiber can reduce the absorption of many oral medications, vitamins, and minerals. You definitely need a time gap. The source suggests taking flaxseed at least 1 hour before or 2 hours after other medications to avoid this.
Good practical advice.
It can also increase the risk of bleeding when taken with anticoagulants or NSAs due to the omega-3s. Interactions with various other meds, blood pressure drugs, oral contraceptives, oral hypoglycemics, insulin, PPIs are also noted.
Wow, that's a lot of interactions for something many people just sprinkle on their breakfast. And contraindications.
Yes, contraindicated in cases of intestinal blockage or acute abdominal pain, obviously. And careful use is required in diabetics whose insulin or blood sugar is hard to manage due to both that potential glucose increase and the absorption issues.
Okay, definitely not as simple as just adding it to your food if you're on medications or have certain conditions. The source really makes that clear.
It does. Next up, Paullinia cupana, guarana.
Another one I associate with energy drinks and supplements. More caffeine, I bet?
Primarily caffeine, yes, as the main active component. Significantly higher caffeine content than coffee beans, actually.
Okay, so the mechanism is the same stimulant effect. Boosting metabolism, suppressing appetite.
Pretty much. Speeding up fat metabolism and suppressing appetite, according to the source's review.
And did the trials reviewed show efficacy for weight loss?
Clinical trials mentioned, including one famous older one that combined it with ephedra, before the ephedra ban, as the source notes, did show significant weight and fat loss compared to placebo.
Okay. And safety, aside from the obvious caffeine effects.
Mostly the typical caffeine-related side effects. Insomnia, nervousness, palpitations, increased blood pressure, headache, anxiety. The source does mention a case report of severe caffeine poisoning from a guarana overdose, highlighting the high caffeine content. It has potential drug interactions with things like diuretics, anticoagulants like warfarin and other stimulants, and it's contraindicated for people with stomach ulcers, hyperthyroidism, or significant cardiovascular problems like hypertension or arrhythmia. Not recommended during pregnancy or lactation either.
Seems like if you're sensitive to caffeine or have underlying heart or thyroid issues, this is definitely one to avoid based on the risks outlined in the source.
Exactly. Standard caffeine cautions, but maybe amplified. Okay, how about a common bean? Phaseolus vulgaris.
Like the beans we eat, kidney beans, white beans, that kind of thing.
Yes, the fruit and seed extracts from them. It contains complex carbohydrates, protein, fiber, and other compounds like phaseolamin.
What's the proposed mechanism for weight loss here? It's not just the fiber.
No, the source points specifically to its ability to inhibit alpha amylase. That's an enzyme that breaks down starches in your gut. So the idea is, by inhibiting that enzyme, it potentially reduces the absorption of carbohydrates from your diet. A starch blocker.
Okay, that makes sense. Did studies support that working?
Animal studies reviewed showed anti-obesity and improved metabolic effects, yes. And a clinical trial mentioned found significant weight loss, BMI reduction, and reduced body fat and subcutaneous fat thickness compared to placebo over 35 days. So some promising clinical data cited here for that specific extract.
Any safety notes? Seems pretty benign. It's just beans.
Generally considered safe, but the source does mention a case report linking occupational exposure handling the bean pods to chronic eczema and shortness of breath in one patient. So maybe potential allergic reactions or sensitivities in some individuals, perhaps more from handling than eating. The source also noted this plant extract appeared in only one combined preparation in their database scan, so maybe not as common as some others.
An allergic reaction from handling the plant. That's an interesting, specific detail. Okay, last one on the detail list. Psyllium. Plantago SPR.
Yes, this usually refers to Plantago ovata or Plantago psyllium, using the seeds, or more commonly the seed husks. Think Metamucil.
Right, known for fiber. Definitely.
Exactly. High fiber and mucilage content. The mechanism is very similar to flaxseed in part. They swell up significantly in the stomach, promoting satiety, and act as a bulk-forming laxative.
Did studies confirm these effects?
Yeah.
Especially for weight loss?
Animal studies showed delayed gastric emptying, yes. Clinical studies demonstrated it could lower plasma glucose and lipids in type 2 diabetics, which is a known benefit. Now, interestingly, for weight loss specifically, the source highlights that one study did not observe a weight loss effect despite these metabolic improvements.
Oh.
However, another clinical study that combined psyllium with lifestyle changes did show greater reductions in body weight, BMI, body fat, and waist circumference compared to lifestyle changes alone. It's also, of course, proven effective for constipation and lowering cholesterol.
So maybe mixed results on weight loss by itself in the clinical trials reviewed, but clear metabolic and digestive benefits and maybe helpful with other changes. And safety, similar to flaxseed.
Very similar. Significant contraindications related to any kind of intestinal obstruction, and requiring adequate fluid intake is stressed. You need to drink plenty of water with it. It's also contraindicated for diabetics where insulin adjustment is difficult, and again, you need that time gap when taking other medications due to the risk of reduced absorption. Same issue as flaxseed.
Okay, fiber's great for regularity and maybe cholesterol, but definitely requires careful use, adequate water, and timing with other meds, as the source highlights. And it's popular in supplements.
Yes. The source found it quite prevalent in the database, 14 preparations listed, 5 mono, 9 combined, so widely available. And just to round it out, the source also briefly mentioned a few other plants with reported anti-obesity effects in some studies it reviewed. Things like turmeric, curcuma longa, black seed, nigella sativa, and garlic, Allium sativum, though not in the same level of detail.
Right. So, taking a step back now after going through all these plants in detail based on the thesis, what's the big picture synthesis from this comprehensive review? What are the main takeaways for now?
Well, first, it really drives home that there's a lot of research happening, or at least interest, in many different plans for weight loss. And importantly, they're acting through incredibly diverse mechanisms. It's not just one simple pathway: appetite, metabolism, absorption, satiety.
Yeah, you definitely see that mix of findings, though, right? Some promising results from lab and animal studies, but then the clinical evidence in humans, well, it's often more complex, more varied. Sometimes it shows effects, sometimes not, or maybe only when combined with other things like diet and exercise changes. The source is pretty explicit. Many more well-designed clinical studies are needed to really nail down efficacy for a lot of these.
Absolutely. And the safety aspect, which we kept coming back to, is just critical. This thesis meticulously details that several of these plants have significant documented side effects, drug interactions, or contraindications. Some, like ephedra, were clearly banned due to severe, well-documented risks. Others, like bitter orange, papaya, Garcinia cambogia, yerba mate. They have concerning case reports highlighted in the source, linking them to serious health issues, cardiovascular events, liver damage, even potential cancer risks with long-term use in one case.
That look at the real-world supplement database, the RX Media PharmaScan, was really telling too, wasn't it? It shows many of these plants are in products people can buy, but as the source points out, they aren't always marketed specifically for weight loss. They're often in combined products where the primary intended use might be completely different, maybe joint health, like with bromelain, or general well-being, or simply as a laxative, like we saw with senna and psyllium.
Exactly. Which means you, the listener, can't just see a familiar plant name on a label and assume it's effective or even safe for weight loss. You have to look much closer. What's the specific product actually intended for? What's the dosage? And crucially, check for those potential interactions and safety warnings that this source does such a good job of compiling from the literature.
Yeah, the source concludes that despite the sheer number of preparations out there containing these herbs, relatively few seem to be explicitly positioned solely for weight loss based on their scan, which just reinforces that need for more rigorous clinical study on both efficacy and safety across the board, especially for many of the less studied plants.
Definitely. And its strong recommendation, really echoing everything we've seen in the details, is simply caution. Consult a doctor or pharmacist before using products containing these plants, especially if you have other health conditions or take other medications, given the very real potential for serious side effects, drug interactions, and contraindications detailed so thoroughly in this source. It really just hammers home that natural is absolutely not synonymous with safe or risk-free.
Wow, that truly was a deep dive into the world of herbal approaches to weight loss, all based on this one extensive master's thesis. From plants that might make you feel full, to metabolic boosters, enzyme blockers, and even, fascinatingly, taste modifiers. It's clearly a complex landscape, filled with both, potential and, as the source makes abundantly clear, some significant risks.
It powerfully underscores how valuable a well-researched source like this thesis can be. It goes so far beyond the marketing claims you might see. It provides crucial details on safety, the actual state of the scientific evidence highlighting where it's strong, where it's maybe weak or preliminary, and importantly, where the real dangers might lie based on reported cases.
Yeah, understanding the proposed mechanisms, the actual study findings, or the lack thereof for specific purposes sometimes, and especially paying attention to those detailed side effects, interactions, and case reports. It really empowers you to make much more informed decisions about any supplements you might be considering.
So reflecting on this deep dive into the compiled research from this thesis, what stands out most to you, the listener, about using phytotherapy for weight loss? What questions does this raise for you about how these products are researched, marketed, regulated, particularly when serious safety concerns like liver failure or potential cancer risk have been reported in the scientific literature for some of them? Something to think about.
Definitely food for thought. Thanks for diving in with us today.